For many, many years, they've been at odds, to put it nicely, and to normalize their relations. This will be the third country where we're doing this, and we have many, many more coming.
Well, I want to say that we're expanding the circle of peace so rapidly with your leadership, Mr. President, your able team. History in the making.
Yeah, so basically what that means.
The question is it history in the making or is it weapon deals in the making? Sudan, Bahrain, and United Emirates are going to get a lot of weapons, lucrative weapon deals. And the question is it a peace agreement or is it a way to get weapons? Therefore, making it more dangerous rather than less dangerous. How can we trust a dictatorship? And a lot of people in Israel don't really trust the prime minister. Last week on Saturday night, and maybe perhaps this Saturday night, just in front of my house, there was a huge demonstration. And one of the signs said, "We're a sinking submarine," hinting towards a submarine deal that Prime Minister Netanyahu had made. And there's very little trust in the prime minister. He's actually called the crime minister. So we have a prime minister in Israel who seems very confident. His name is Bibi. It seems as if Bibi Netanyahu is Donald Trump's poodle. He's like licking the hands of his master, when in fact, I think as a person concerned with the security in Israel, because it affects me and mine directly, whether there would be rockets coming over and endangering my life and the lives of people around me, depends on these deals. So for what Donald Trump, far away, can make all kinds of deals, but the question is, are these real peace agreements or are these just a way of these dictatorships to get weapons and money from the US? So this is a big question because Prime Minister Netanyahu is not in a good position. Donald Trump is not in a good position. He might lose the elections. Prime Minister Netanyahu has demonstrations all over Israel and in front of his home asking him to step down. People are not happy with how he handled coronavirus crises. Same as Donald Trump. People are not happy with how he handled the crises. And at the moment, both are under pressure. So the peace agreements are sort of like we say in theater, it's like a sort of mechanism where you all of a sudden this mechanism appears to save the drama. So sort of like a miracle. And the question is this just a trick? Is this just a rabbit they're pulling out of the hat? And of course, they have both interests to appear as if they're making miraculous historical agreements, but time will tell whether this will be indeed a dependable agreement or whether this was just a way of getting weapons from the US.
Is hopefully anyway a closer relationship between Sudan and Israel. They may be able to export defense material and Sudan, and it's going to be made official over the course of the next 45 days. They may now be entitled to more American aid.
Exactly.
And one more question we were talking about before. Voting's not compulsory in the US, and it certainly looks like it could be the highest voter turnout in more than a century. What do you think in terms of voters who will stay with their party, even if perhaps they're not happy with the potential leader, or do you think they could even switch to the other side, do you think? So voting over policy, preferring to the president?
Hard to say at this point, Janie. I mean, there's no doubt from the people that I've been talking to anyway, they've locked in their votes. They're either Republican or they're Democrat, and people are saying that in different parts of America at the moment too. But it is a staggering figure. That's some 50 million Americans have so far registered their votes early. Their record is just over 60 million for the entirety of the election. As we've been reporting today, there's still another 11 days to go. So I think it can be safe to say that record is going to be shattered. Which way that's going to go, well, it's really hard to say this time.
Well, Samuel B. Cat chose Donald Trump last night. I think he was just putting his paw, hitting with his paw on Donald Trump. I think it's maybe because his voice, Donald Trump's voice and presence, irritated him. I don't know, maybe he liked the hairpiece. But what I want to say, this is a comical relief, Samuel B. Cat, but maybe that is a better predicting factor than all these analysis and all these people from different various media outlets trying to predict what is going to be the outcome. What I can say so far is there's a lot of similarity between the American elections and our situation in Israel. We've had 3 elections in a very short time, and the outcome was very close. And Prime Minister Netanyahu stayed in office despite a lot of criticism about him. So I want to discuss the similarities between Israel and the U.S. Both in Israel and in the U.S., there is a leader who's very controversial. The difference is that there are, of course, differences. Both of them are accused of corruption, of not being honest with the people, of mishandling the corona crises, and attempting to present a completely false picture to the public. Um, the difference between they've both been married 3 times, interesting enough, another common theme, a macho man. The difference between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, besides Israel being a tiny, tiny, tiny country and the United States being a huge global power and the leader of the free world, is that these leaders will do anything to stay in office, and their moral compass is questionable. We've had several demonstrations against Prime Minister Netanyahu just in front of my house last week. There were people holding signs, "We live in a sinking submarine," hinting to the weapons deal that Prime Minister Netanyahu did. And we wonder, every time there's a weapons deal, we really do wonder, what is the intention? Will this increase security or decrease it? Having said that, certainly I remember a time before Prime Minister Netanyahu was in office where buses exploded, but yet I would have hoped that by now we'd get closer to negotiation with the Palestinians, to having a better plan for coexistence. And at the moment, it looks very, very far away. And making peace with the United Emirates and Sudan, while I'm sure it can help, the question is, can we depend on these agreements, and are we not actually avoiding the real issues? And I think both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Donald Trump are geniuses or magicians at avoiding the issues and misleading the public into thinking the situation is great, couldn't be better. Oh, what a beautiful, what a beautiful world, and actually avoiding dealing and confronting real problems that citizens are facing up to. And the other common theme between Israel and the US is that the other candidate is not so attractive. In Israel, we haven't had such a controversial figure like Biden, but certainly things have come up for Biden, namely his son's deals with Ukraine that's cast a dark shadow about whether Joe Biden is the nice, decent guy he presents himself to be. So it's very complicated. And the other common theme, at last but not least, is that both democratic election systems are very faulty. In Israel, we have a system where a small minority group of ultra-Orthodox can just hold hostage the government and dictate all sorts of conditions for extremists that are a minority. In the US, you have a great divide between Republican and Democrats. In Israel, we have also our prime minister belittling and denouncing people for being leftists. It's a curse word, and Donald Trump also used the word leftist as a curse word, rather than respecting that other people's political views. There's a lack of respect for other people's views. There are views that are not typical of a democracy, or one would expect from a democracy. It is more typical of a dictatorship. A denouncement of anyone who thinks differently. An attack on the media is another common theme we have in Israel and in the US. Great divide between right and left, sadly, and not. It's an atmosphere where there's not too too much of a bridge between the two extremes, and that's pretty sad. There's not enough place for smaller parties, or the systems definitely need to be revised, changed. Um, Both in Israel and the USA, we have to find a different way of electing our leaders. And it's really hard for me to believe that in the US, the huge United States of America, there's only two elderly men with very faulty files. How can I say it? Donald Trump definitely has a lot of skeletons in his closet, whether it's not showing tax returns, whether the way he treats women, whether dealings with foreign governments, um, whether it's appointing his family to be advisors. And Joe Biden definitely has, now it's coming out, his deals with making sure his son has $1 million, multi more than $1 million salary from a Ukraine oil company when he was actually leading an American foreign policy delegation in Ukraine. Definitely conflict of interest, without doubt, and so many other problems that Joe Biden has accused Donald Trump of, when actually things like building cages for immigrant children were actually built during the time where Obama was in office. And both cases, I say that if the governments were so good, then they wouldn't have come to power, these guys. If the government before Bibi Netanyahu was so great, we wouldn't have Bibi Netanyahu wouldn't have come to power. The same thing about Donald Trump. If Obama administration was so great, why did Donald Trump get voted into office? A lot of questions there. And definitely the bottom line is both countries need to revise their election system and take a really uh, deep look at how they elect representatives, how the whole system works, because it cannot be that there's only two candidates. It cannot be that there's a big divide between right and left, and there's no place for more parties. I know that in Europe there's so many parties involved in the government. In Israel, it's just too many too many opportunities for extremists to just take over and hold the government hostage, and leadership of a minority dictating to the leader, elected leader. So in the US, the problem is that there's just too much of a divide. It's like America never got over the Civil War. And I definitely don't see a way out of it. Donald Trump is definitely a dangerous leader, whether it's his lack of interest in environmental issues, whether I don't see how I can trust him to do peace treaties in the Middle East, because it just seems too quick. And like, oh, nobody else did it, but I did it. I mean, he's not a magician. He's just a very deceptive person who can easily distort reality or present it um, in a very glorified light. And so both leaders in Israel and the USA are difficult to trust, are really untrustworthy. Um, I think the bigger your country, the more difficult it is. And of course, US has a country made up of immigrants, a lot of racism, and I think Israel, despite all the issues we do have some racism we need to confront as well, but I think the situation is different. There are similarities, but there are also differences. And I think in Israel, first of all, we're only 9 million people. Second of all, it's Arabs and it's Jews and Muslims, and there's a lot of liberal people here. Um, in some ways, Israel's situation is worse than US. In some ways, US is worse. But we do have a problem. Both countries are held hostage by religious extremists. In the case of the U.S., it's the evangelists. In the case of Israel, it's the extreme Orthodox, ultra Orthodox parties that blackmail the government, and it's just and do horrible things. So, what I would like to say is that it's interesting to see the similarities and the differences. I would like to wish all Americans good election time, but if I was American, I just wouldn't know who to vote for. I really wouldn't. It would be a very difficult decision, and I might be tempted not to vote for anyone. In which case, of course, that's also a decision. Then you have to accept whatever decision that occurs. You are not part of it, which is sad. But I really can't say which is worse. I have a feeling that Biden administration cannot be trusted either, due to the Obama administration disastrous policies in the Middle East. So I really don't know, and the Clinton and the Hillary Clinton as well. So I don't know. My conclusion is I don't know what's going to happen. I would definitely, like many other people that are not extreme right, I would like to see America have a new leadership, but I would have preferred Kamala Harris. Is that her name? I'm not sure. I would prefer the vice president candidate to be the leader, and I'm really sad that America is not ready for a woman president. I think she would do a much better job than Joe Biden. I think a lot of people are counting on Joe Biden becoming too forgetful or having challenges, health challenges, so his vice president could take over. But I really wonder, why can't a woman be a presidential candidate? Why couldn't she have made it through? Although I'm not sure America would have been ready for it, but I think she could have handled Donald Trump. I really think I could see her in a debate against him, and I think that is exactly what he needs. A kick in the teeth by a woman. Anyway, peace, light, and love. And that's my point of view anyway. It's my opinion. Sam is now taking a break from the debates. I think he's really had it. And if it doesn't knock down the TV, I'll continue this interpretation. Peace, light, and love.